Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're in class with us today. Jason is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at Genesis Communications Network. I'm Vincent Finelli. I'd like to read a communique that I received before we get started with today's class. And today's class, hour number 1 will be the Corona Panic, and hour number 2 will be the Depression. The communique starts out, Namaste, Vincent. Of course, I'm writing this partly in jest. I hope I'm not alone in the student body to miss the regularity of Captain John Ragan on your show. I realize that he may have a little to add to his already stark views. I hope at least that he and his wife are well prepared. If Captain John Ragan can be reached and scheduled if possible, please let us know the date in advance on your other shows so that the students do not miss the conversation and education. I would love to hear some of the updates from him as this coronavirus pandemic escalates. I'm amazed that people missed the point that you emphasize, that just the supply chain disruption without power disruption, as federally published already, is already happening and can be lethal in many ways. I agree wholeheartedly with your distilled view that we must first survive and emerge on the other side of this pandemic, even if several hospitals and their parking lots are reported with no unusual traffic nationwide. Uncertainty about the origins and microbes, etc., and such minutiae, for the lack of a better word. With regards, Amit Singh. So, Amit, I know you're in the front row. I can see you from here. It's great to have you in class. Thank you for requesting the class with Captain John Ragan. He will be wiping the smiles right off your face. There's no question about it, with facts. And he will share his opinions. I'm delighted to be broadcasting with my dear friend, Captain John Ragan. Welcome, Captain John Ragan.
Oh, boy.
Is it Monday?
I think I have a year's worth of Mondays ready for us here.
Yeah. John, thank you for being with us and taking time to prepare for this broadcast, a most serious broadcast. I'm just going to take my seat in the front row and pay attention and take notes.
I tell you, in all of the years that I was working on preparing for whatever was coming, I never did war game a pandemic. And there's a lot of, the toolkit that works, and we were probably prepared as best we could with the resources we had. There's a lot of things we don't know about this virus. There's a lot of things we don't know about how it's totally affected us. As far as Becky and I, we had made a trip to Houston to visit her parents Valentine's weekend. And a couple of weeks later, the last week of February, we were both feeling a little off and also noticed a decrease in hunger level. And that Sunday evening, which was, I remember right, was March 1st. Yes, it was. We took our temperature, and we were running a minor temperature. So that's the point where Becky started working from home. And we've been pretty much together nearly 24/7 ever since, with a couple of exceptions of going to the grocery store. And it's hard to say if we've been hit by the virus. We're still occasionally running some low-grade fever. To me, that suggests that we have been exposed. Eventually, we'll have some antibody tests done. Quest Diagnostics now offers one direct to the public. It's $120 roughly per person. And I'm just going to wait a little bit to make sure that that test is accurate before investing those funds in it. But whether or not we have been exposed, the truth is, with this virus, sooner or later, you will be exposed. And I'm going to cover a lot of things today. Some of this has not been approved by lords and masters at the WHO and the CDC. And because of that, if you want to share this broadcast with others, it may or may not end up on Ron Gibson's YouTube channel, because YouTube doesn't like anything but the official truth to get out there. So you may have to point people to the podcast section on gcnlive.com if you want to pass this along. I've got a ton of links for the coronavirus, and it's not my intent to go into detail, but rather to give these to you as references where you can go back and look at some of these things. But going forward, this is a life changer for quite some time. A lot of people are being hopeful on an anti-viral vaccine. And in the case of coronavirus, if that happens, this will be the first time in history that they will have a vaccine for coronavirus. Before this century, there were 4 different strains of coronavirus that affected humans. We're now up to 7 strains. There was the first SARS, MERS, and now the SARS-2, known as COVID-19. In our case, and everybody needs to determine, especially if you're older or have pre-existing comorbidity conditions, how you're going to do things going forward. I wasn't able to find the link, but there's several articles out there talking about the death rate on the various comorbidity causes like diabetes, high blood pressure, on and on. And obviously, the older you are, especially if you have a 6 or better as the first digit of your age, you're at more risk. Not of catching the virus, but of dying from complications of this virus. And if you have several of these comorbidities, your odds are, worse. For myself, my best guess right now from this article that had put together how many comorbidities you have and what that equates to as a chance of dying, for me, it's about 33%. For Becky, 25%. Now, those are great odds if you're playing a lotto. That's not so great odds when it's life and death. So what do we get to look forward to until they develop a vaccine? And if they are unable to develop a vaccine, obviously this becomes more of a permanent condition. But things that we used to do in our past life is, like go to a sit-down restaurant, go to a movie theater. I already mentioned, travel down to Houston to visit Becky's parents. Those things become dangerous activities. Shopping at the grocery store is another one. Going to church is another one. Going to the office is another one. And there's only so much you can do, from your action to protect yourself. And that's why this is going to be problematic for some time. And you might wonder, why is it so dangerous for us to travel? Well, we could go through a drive-through to get some food on the trip down there, and that would be fairly low risk. However, it's the mileage between Dallas and Houston is take close to 300 miles. So a potty stop or two in there is pretty much required. And as we get through the discussion this morning, you'll see how that by itself is dangerous. And, maybe we can mitigate it a little bit. And this is basically, like I say, something we're going to have to live with for some time. If you want to travel by air, if the airline isn't requiring everybody to wear a mask, you can do some things, but having everybody wear a mask is the best thing that can be done. And we are nowhere near that level of commitment here in the United States. And unfortunately, that starts at the White House. This is not just the virus itself, but it's also been politicized on both sides. So make sure your seatbelt's fastened, and we'll get engaged on the other side of the break.
Captain John Ragan's with us, and we're talking about the coronavirus and the corona panic. And just to put this in perspective, the number of infections in the United States per day comes out to about 3 infections a minute in the United States. 3 a minute. Captain John Ragan, back to you.
There's a lot of people that think this isn't really real. There's also a lot of people that think this is a big conspiracy theory as well, something that the globalists wanted to inflict. And I doubt it was that, although those that do engage in controlling our lives will use any event to their advantage. I don't see this as a bioattack. It may be a bioweapon, but if you wanted to spread an infection like this, just feeding it in one little place is not the way that you'd want to do it. because there's a chance that it could die out and then you'd have to restart it. But one of the biggest things I've seen is that, this really doesn't kill a lot of people. It's, not as bad as a seasonal flu. And we've got something here that pretty much dispels that, puts it to rest, and shows just how bad this is. And first link I have there is called Denying Death. And I can understand there's a lot of denial going on. This is not something that we want to have around for a long period of time. But what I've seen lately, and I've not found a site that's actually tracking this on a regular basis. This is based off an article that was first published in the Financial Times. And what they did is look at the average mortality, and that varies just a tad month to month. And they've done this for a number of countries and some cities. And you look at what's here in 2020, and you see the spike in deaths. And there's no other suspect out there besides the coronavirus. So, for example, the first one shown here is New York City, and it's almost a flat line from January through December at about 1,000, and I believe this is per week. And now it peaked up to 6,000, running about 3,000 now. And the 12,700 additional deaths is an increase of nearly 300%. And, some people might say, well, that's not the coronavirus doing that. Well, it doesn't matter. These are all deaths. And there's no other explanation for these additional deaths other than the coronavirus. So we don't have to worry about what's actually listed on the death certificate. It's not a guess by the physician. These are people that died. And we're seeing, other places. Spain was up 51%. England and Wales up 37%. France up 34%. And, this, I hope, like I said, some people are still going to be in denial, but it should show that this is real and it is a deadly pathogen. And as we go through these links, you'll also see that, those that recovered are not necessarily in good shape.
Right. And some have brain damage and organ damage as well. Captain John Ragan's with us, and we're talking about the coronavirus, the denial, and the corona panic. We'll be right back. Captain John Ragan's with us. And the website, if you'd like to follow along in class, is the Financial State of the Union.com. The Financial State of the Union.com. And you can follow along with the links as they're posted on the website, the Financial State of the Union.com. Captain John, please continue.
If you were listening to the news there, Texas is one of those states that is lessening restrictions starting today. And I expect to see a resurgence of new cases in a couple of weeks. And it's, that's not just an opinion. That's looking at what's happened with other countries. China has locked down a city of 10 million people. They had opened theaters and gyms, and they've now closed those nationwide again. Singapore was another country that was ahead of us and lightened up, and they've now gone on lockdown for another 2 months. So this is a nasty virus, and you just can't, treat it with kid gloves. And it's also true that, if you just totally lock down, that destroys an already pathetic economy. And then you've got the third leg of it is, if you let it go unchecked, you overrun the hospitals, which has not yet happened in the United States, but it's happened in many other countries. And that leads to even more deaths because it takes the critical care beds away from other people, like those that have heart attacks or gunshot victims or severe car wrecks, anything else that requires critical care. So getting back to the list, I've got masking the situation. I first learned about how this works back in January. Chris Martinson has a PhD in pathology. He's the one that I follow most often. And he explained that surgical masks are not there to protect you. They're there to protect other people. If you're wanting to protect yourself, you need to wear a mask like a N95 mask or better. But if everybody is wearing a surgical mask or something similar, that blocks most of the virus that's being shed by that person. And because there's such a long lead time and so many people asymptomatic, everybody needs to wear a mask no matter how well they feel. And as far as masks go, I got a link there, blue mask. There's a shortage of N95 masks out there. And this talks about some people that tested all kinds of different things as replacements. And they found out these blue shop towels do a darn good job. They recommend, or the two brands they tested, the Toolbox shop towel and Seps Industrial blue towel were the best. But they also found the Scott's Pro Shop towels didn't fare quite as well. But again, all of these have much better than just a simple cloth mask. And there's something that can be done fairly inexpensively as well. I've included Wikipedia links on the common cold and coronavirus. We don't have time to really discuss these in any depth, but basically if you go through there, you'll see that a lot of things we're seeing with this virus is true of other viruses, including the aerosolization of the virus. And, everything from the usage of zinc. I'm looking at the common cold one. It's not just a single family of viruses that's included in that. Rhinovirus is a big part. Coronaviruses is about 15% of common cold viruses. And I guess being as how I've already talked about the different coronaviruses that affect humans, I'll skip that article to save some time. But basically, as you know, we don't have any kind of vaccine for the common cold, which includes coronaviruses. Maybe this time it's different, but if they do come up with a safe, effective vaccine, that's great. But if they don't, what is your plan B? And a recent article, I think I just found it last night. The link there is coronaviruses. This comes out of Nature, which is peer-reviewed. So it's got more status than other papers I've seen published. There were 3 different universities publishing papers that were not peer-reviewed that showed that this virus does aerosolize. This one talks about the respiratory virus shedding in exhaled breath and efficacy of face masks. So you already know that if you sneeze or cough, you're going to shed some virus. Well, here it's saying just breathing and talking also sheds this virus. And it can remain suspended in the air for longer than you think. So, again, this is why, if we're going to get a handle on this, everybody in public is going to need to wear some kind of mask. The next one has a nice simulation. Every breath you take, a university, I think from Finland, put together an animation showing how a cough can linger in the air and go travel into different grocery store aisles. And it's rather disturbing. That is one of the reasons why, unless something changes, I will not be inside a grocery store again. I will have to take advantage of the pickup or delivery options. And don't forget the poo. The way this virus gets into your body is through mucous membranes. That's your eyes, your nose, your mouth. That's why you need the face mask that takes care of the nose and mouth. Glasses help a little bit, at least for the particles that are coming straight in. If you really want to protect yourself, you need some kind of goggles that more encloses the area around your eyes. Below the waist, the holes you have there are also mucous membranes. And there is evidence that, those exit points can also spread virus. And when you flush, that throws it up in the air. So when you're going on a road trip and you're going into one of those public bathrooms, I think especially if somebody, has the runs, and you may not even know it because they might have just been there 15, 30 minutes ago. And when they flush, there goes the virus up in the air. And that's one of those cases where you would definitely want to have an N95 mask and eye protection so that you don't get infected. The next one, visual. Make sure. No, inflammation. Largest study of U.S. COVID-19 emissions reveals the single biggest factor. You get obesity and the other factors, and the root cause in all of those is inflammation. And I've talked about this before on other shows. Things like sugar causing inflammation, excess iron in the form of ferritin causes inflammation, processed oils, what you call vegetable oils, cause inflammation. Stress causes inflammation, and how many people are under stress now, especially financially. Lack of sleep causes inflammation, and this just kind of ramps up inflammation. And we're even seeing inflammation in children where it's causing skin conditions. So probably the best way to manage that is, antioxidants, which help vitamin C especially. Humans are unfortunately one of the few mammals that do not produce their own vitamin C, and it has a short half-life in the body. So if you're wanting to go that route, I don't recommend just taking a large dose of vitamin C because it's not going to stick around. More doesn't help. So if you want to take, say, 2 grams, 2,000 milligrams in a day, just get the 500 milligram tablets and take one 4 times a day, and that'll help keep your vitamin C levels up for most of the day. The next one, more damage. Doctors fear coronavirus survivors may have lasting damage to multiple organs. And we're looking at more and more reports of how this causes inflammation of blood vessels, and as time goes on, we'll learn more and more about this. But it's not just the lungs, which most people already know about. It's the heart, it's the kidneys, it's the brain, it's the nervous system, and we don't know how long this will last. Some of these effects or damage might repair themselves over time. Some might be lifelong. So it's not like catching a cold or flu where, once you're over it, you're pretty much over it. This one is, just tough. Coronavirus harms the brain and nervous system of half of seriously ill patients in a third of all cases. And from what I can tell, that was hospitalized cases. We don't know how much it affects the non-hospitalized cases, those that are not quite severe enough for hospitalization, those that are asymptomatic. We just don't know yet. And we'll try and round this out when we get back from the break.
Okay, and we have Amit Singh, who called and requested this broadcast on hold. We're not taking calls today, but we will take Amit Singh's call when we come back right after these few short commercial announcements. I've been looking forward to this phone call for quite some time, class. I'm delighted to welcome Amit Singh. Amit, thank you for sending me the communiques and requesting Captain John Ragan for this broadcast. Welcome.
Good morning, Vincent, and good morning, Captain Ragan. And thanks for taking my call as well as my email or emails. I have also talked to some people in life sciences and physicians as well. So my impression is same as what Dr. Sheely often says, that he gets conflicting reports about how this affects and how this really works. But I find the same thing as Captain Ragan is saying, that it is affecting older people differently, say with some pre-existing conditions, and brain or circulatory system damage in younger people, and even young children are not being spared. I heard that they are developing maybe Kawasaki syndrome. But what I have heard is that it is supposed to linger, and it damages our bodies in a very unusual manner. So it is not to be dismissed at all. What I find logically not adding up is the mask part. That is, if the mask is working, it should be handled as biohazard, say for disposal. But if it is not working, then there's no need to wear it. So that's the part that makes me puzzled, that is the mask really working? And if it is working, then we should incinerate it or just dispose it carefully as any biohazard is done. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
I'm not sure we have to necessarily worry about incinerating these. If you just put them in a sack and let them sit around for 2 or 3 weeks, there's not going to be enough virus to do anything. When I go out, the masks and gloves that I use, I just put in the floorboard of the back seat, and at some point in the future, I'll go and collect those and feel pretty safe about that.
Captain John Ragan and Amit, here's
from the authorities that please consider this while disposing, but that part is missing from the so-called authorities.
Amit, here's what we do. We put the masks and the gloves in the sunlight. So, for example, if we exit the vehicle, we will leave them on top of the hood so that, or the roof or the rear deck in the sunlight so that the ultraviolet light from the sun will disinfect and kill the virus. That's what we do.
Yeah, that's very wise, but because authorities are silent on this, that makes me doubtful about their qualification or real intentions or motivations. So
Amit, you used the word authorities, I believe. I don't trust anything that I hear. The only thing that
exactly.
Right. When I've heard the president say that he's going to order the meat packers to resume operations, even though almost a couple thousand have been infected. Actually, I think it's 5,000 have been infected in the meat packing industry. 20 have died. It's crazy. It's beyond crazy. Declaring a war on this. When I was a child in church, in the Catholic Church, I learned about leprosy. The priest would talk about leper colonies and how these people were infected and their bodies were eating themselves. And if you went near them, you could contract leprosy. So you could see when a person was a leper, and what was done was they were moved to leper colonies where they lived out the rest of their days, but separate from others. Okay, this is like leprosy, except for the fact that we can't see it. So anyone and everyone,
maybe hundreds of times more infectious than leprosy. So
right. I'm with you.
Is very apt that is modern leprosy. Yes.
What I'm saying is that back then you could see when a person was a leper because they had physical evidence on their bodies, and you could get it. Now you can't see it, so any and everyone can be a carrier, and we don't know. So just by demanding that these beef plants stay open is beyond crazy to me. Because
I agree.
Because we know from what Dr. Shealy said that a refrigerated body can carry the virus for a month or more. So why wouldn't the pork and chicken and beef carry it in the packages that are refrigerated for a month or more? Okay, so to me, the eating of, we'll call it fresh meat, is extremely risky. I'd love to hear what Captain John Ragan has to say when we come back. Amit, did you want to hold over the top of the hour news?
No, I think I'm done. Thank you.
Amit, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your communiques and your kindness and requesting Captain John Ragan. Captain John Ragan and I will be right back after the top of the hour news and commercial announcements. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. We're not taking calls today, class. The reason that I took Amit Singh's call is he is the gentleman who requested this broadcast with Captain John Ragan. I did not know he was going to call, but I did not give out the number at the beginning of the broadcast, so no calls today. Thank you. Captain John Ragan, I'm wondering if the people who are saying this is a fraud, this is a hoax, are people who are not inclined to prepare for the kinds of things that we would prepare for. The people who would say, I don't need to go to the store and get, some beans and rice and flour and so forth. I'll get it. It's always going to be there. It's the way it is, and it'll always be like that. So I don't need to prepare. And by the way, I want to go out when I want to go out. I don't want to be locked in. I want to live my life, and that's what I'm going to do. And what they're really saying is that who cares about infecting other people? That's what they're saying to me. I think it's risky. I think it's dangerous. I think it is careless, and I think it's reckless. Any comments before we continue?
Well, it was just this week that Pence went to the Mayo Clinic and didn't wear a mask. And you have to understand, the president and vice president have huge demands on their time. They can't just sit around and research things. They're dependent on the people around them. And unfortunately, apparently, the people around them don't do a very good job. And you also get, the billionaire class, the ruling class, whether they're, in Congress or in state houses around the country, that it's almost a given that they're going to have some kind of arrogance issue. And I think we're seeing that, unfortunately, with our leaders in the White House. I was thinking about showing, there were a couple of pictures on the other side of the aisle, Chuck Schumer and AOC, that were wearing their masks incorrectly. Both of them had their nose exposed. It wasn't AOC, it was Sheila Jackson Lee, my former non-representative when I lived in Houston. There's a spectrum. You can't just, tally it up to one reason, and it's kind of sad to see. Some people don't like it because it restricts their freedom. Get over it. You see those church pastors. We're going to hold service no matter how many people it kills. And some of those pastors have died from coronavirus since. And if you actually go back and read the Bible in the Old Testament, God gave us the instructions. People were essentially quarantined until they were clean, and then they were allowed to rejoin the group. So to me, it's what we're doing to stop the spread is the right thing to do. Is biblical. What makes it tough is we have so many people not showing symptoms that can spread the virus, and that's what really mucks things up. In fact, that was the next article out of China. Nearly 8 out of 10 patients in China caught it from somebody with no symptoms. And what are we doing here? We're demanding symptoms. We're checking for temperature. And even those that were tested positive and admitted to the hospital, fever was only a symptom in about a third of them. So we're wasting so much time and effort on the ridiculous when, the answer is everybody needs to wear a mask. Yep. And the countries that have done that, required people to wear a mask in public, they've had much better outcomes. And unfortunately, our political class doesn't see fit to do that, and then many Americans don't see fit either.
Okay, so if you look at Rush Limbaugh, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting him exactly, but he had a message that this is no more dangerous than the common cold, if I remember correctly, and that message is extremely dangerous, if you ask me. And Mike Pence, Vice President Mike Pence, going out in public, violating the protocol that the government has established, is not leading by example. That is dangerous as well. So people might look at him and say, well, he's not wearing a mask, so there's no such thing, and it's a hoax, and it's a fraud, and it's, to use their words, BS. I couldn't disagree more. Captain John Ragan, I've been listening intently to everything you've been saying, and you and I are on exactly the same page. But it's lonely here. It is extremely lonely because most people disagree with us. Most.
And that's why I led with the article I did, because you look at the historical averages for people dying, and to have such a spike, boy, you really have to be in denial to ignore that. These are all deaths.
And not only that, people say it's no worse than the common flu. Well, who wants to get the flu? Really? Who wants to get the flu? And as you said, we are tying up our hospitals and our resources with people who are reckless and careless, so that those of us who break our legs and get injured while working and doing our normal duties, or get run into by some deranged person on a cell phone operating a vehicle, we might need medical attention, and we can't get it because of the careless and reckless people who are tying up and clogging up our medical responses, hospitals, clinics, etc. Please continue, Captain John Ragan. I'm listening intently and taking notes. You're doing a fabulous job, as usual, wiping those smiles off our faces. Class, I hope you're paying attention. I hope you share this.
This ought to continue to wipe those smiles off. You have no right, is what I entitled the link. Forced vaccinations upheld by the Supreme Court in 1905. The case was Jacobson versus Massachusetts. So if they develop a vaccine and it is very damaging, the thought of my body, my choice, nope, your body, no choice. And that was,
John, I predict that if that were the case, that's when the shooting will either start or escalate.
It could be. I've included a link. It's not just the old. This is from a community just south of Dallas. It's still in Dallas County. Lancaster's 17-year-old with no underlying health condition dies from COVID-19. And, to me, this is a very sad report. And I suppose I should mention the young woman is black, and that's just to it's not any kind of comment on a person's race. There's a physiological fact that the darker your skin, the more sunlight you need to produce your vitamin D. And when you're at higher latitudes, which Dallas is starting to get up there, and especially in wintertime, if you've got light skin, you probably are not getting enough sunlight to produce the vitamin D you need. So one, I just wanted to point out that, you don't have to be old with multiple conditions to die from this. And two, I've got a link that's actually a ray of hope D solution. This is a study of 212 COVID-19 patients, and it shows their vitamin D level and what percent had critical and severe infections. And it turns out that if you had a reading of greater than or equal to 30, 96% of those ended up with mild cases. And it's very telling, just in the 21 to 29 measure that the critical, the severe, the ordinary, you weren't in good shape. But even if you ended up in those categories, only 4 ended up in critical, 4 ended up in severe, 7 ended up in ordinary. All the rest ended up in mild. So you can't really wait to do that. You basically need to have your system set up. And since I've been on Dr. Shealy's vitamin D protocol for years, and I'm actually a bit on the high side. My number's around 100 last time it was tested. So that speaks, to my hope that, if I do get exposed, that I would end up with a mild case. And just to wrap up, to stay current, that link goes to the Peak Prosperity videos on YouTube, and we don't know how long these are going to continue to be posted because YouTube is very hostile to anything that goes against the establishment's so-called truth. Chris Martinson's been reporting for about 100 days now. If you haven't been following, I'd recommend going back at least 7 to 10 days just to get caught up, and then keep on watching him. I think he's down to 5 days a week now, releasing new videos on this, and he is going to start transitioning from the virus and the effects of the virus to what's going to be happening with our economy, which is what we're going to be talking about next. Did you want to discuss anything else here?
No, let's talk about the corona panic, which is my term for the result of the coronavirus, the sociological, the financial, economic, all of those aspects of what is happening with the corona panic. For example, the meat supply. Right now, farmers are having trouble selling their animals into the market because the processing plants are shutting down. We reported that the number was like 5%. We said, no, we think it's 25%. Yeah, it's 25%. We'll be right back. Yeah, from day one class, we said right here on USA Prepares, I said that the virus is going to be bad enough, but the panic that ensues will be even worse. And let's talk about that, Captain John Ragan.
I also want to point out that the virus didn't really cause our problems. It was just the pin that popped the bubble. It's got more effects than if, for example, what I've been saying is that we're going to hit the end of the debt road, and it was looking like that was going to be 2024. And the rest of our lives would have been normal, but we would have been, thrown into the Greater Depression. Well, what's happened now is the actions that Congress and the Fed have done has eliminated those 4 years that we would have had. And, we're now there, plus we got the viral effects to deal with. Back in the Great Depression, there was also a food issue. And it was a matter of, there was food, but, getting it from where it was to the people was a problem. And, here we are, practically 100 years later and have the same issue. I want to go back and talk about, the question of, would this virus be in the food from these processing plants, and would that be a problem? Well, the risk would not be zero, but it probably would not be very high either. You have to worry more about spending time with people, especially in close quarters, whether that's an office, a church, a subway, an airplane, a train. Those are not so good places to be. But this is a virus, not bacteria. It cannot replicate outside, and it appears that, for the most part, the human body, we're now seeing dogs and cats having coronavirus. Whether or not they can pass it along, I don't think we know that answer yet, but maybe it's replicating in them as well. So, like I say, you're going to be exposed sooner or later. And when you're exposed, you want to be exposed to a small amount of the virus, because what the studies are suggesting is that if you get a larger dose of the virus, you have a better chance of having a severe case. Whereas we start off with a small amount of the virus, your body has a chance to not be overwhelmed. And you end up with the milder side. So that nail that down for you.
Yeah, and headlines right now, big headlines, Drudge Report, pandemic could last 2 years. That's exactly the number I've been saying. And actually, I said that it will last 2 years before we start to see any daylight that looks like some kind of normal of what we had before.
Yeah, I think we can use the Spanish flu of 1918 as kind of a guide. And what they did there, people wore masks. And if you look at the field hospitals that were set up, people were out in the air getting sunshine. And what we're doing now is we're putting them in closed buildings with air conditioning, recircling all the pathogens. So,
sunlight is our friend. There's no question. Sunlight is our friend. Dr. Shuley talked about vitamin D. He's talked about vitamin C. You've mentioned both. And, of course, sunshine is vitamin D. And that's what we need. We absolutely need it. And who doesn't feel better with sunlight? Who? We all get a little down in the winter when it's dark and gloomy. And I'm glad to see that President Donald Trump has lifted some of the chemical spraying of the skies that encourage the coronavirus to last longer. So he's eliminated some of the spraying that was protecting the coronavirus. So more sunshine, President Trump, more sunshine. That's what we need. Captain John Ragan, I'll be right back. Captain John Ragan, it's very simple to me to see this. Look at the furloughs, the layoffs, the plant shutdowns, the businesses going under, stores closing, employees, without jobs, those kinds of things. The things that happen are, well, what are we not going to pay since the paycheck stopped? Is it going to be rent? Is it going to be the electric bill? Is it going to be the cell phone bill? Is it going to be medicine? Is it going to be, heat, light, electricity, those kinds of things? What's it going to food? What's it going to be? Well, that first on the list, well, electricity, that's going to be delayed until the threats of the shutoff. Okay, so people still want their electricity. They still want their cell phones. They still want their medicine. But the rent payments, those I can see stopping. Mortgage payments stopping. And then pretty soon it'll be, it's not just me, it's everybody else. And we're all in this together and we're not paying our rent. And now there is a call to not pay rent and mortgage payments. So that's coming. I mean, let's just stick it to the bankers. I think that's what they're saying. But these are the same people who signed contracts and agreed to these regular occurring payments, which I think they are now, a lot of people are now saying, I can't pay it. I just can't pay it. It's a force majeure. I can't pay it. What do you want me to do? Captain John, you see this coming as well?
It's already here. In April, we had 30% of rent and mortgage payments not paid. And, it's going to be interesting to see how that goes for May. And commercial real estate is unbelievable. It's getting to where there's not going to be any of the anchor stores left. And for shopping malls, that's disastrous because those other stores that they have there typically have a clause in their contract that, there's the anchor stores to bring in traffic to support their business. And if that goes away, then, that contract probably goes away as well, or at least a reduced rent or something. It's just mind-blowing what I've seen the last couple of months. And
if I'm not mistaken, Elon Musk told his landlords that, we're not going to pay as much rent. He just told them, we're not doing it.
Cheesecake Factory, we're not paying any rent.
Right. And there are, national chains that have declared bankruptcy already. I mean, we've talked about it, but there's new ones. And it's a big deal. So it looks like we are going down the drain, and I don't see any stopping of this. And I've mentioned for quite some time now, I don't see any pulling out of this for really 20 years.
Yeah.
So probably not in my lifetime will we see the way it used to be. I mean, that's what I see. I'm not trying to scare people. I'm just saying that if you look at the food industry, if you look at the supply chain shutdowns, cracks, breaks, it's really, really serious. Trying to buy parts, trying to conduct business as normal is very, very difficult. I talked to a person who was trying to get the battery wasn't working on an iPhone, just trying to get that repaired. Well, you can't just buy a battery. You have to bring it to someone to have them fix it. Well, they don't want to touch your phone because your phone may be infected. So they don't want to touch your phone. So what do? They say, well, we've got another phone for you. You can buy a new one. Okay, so you buy a new one. Now, how do you get that switched over so that new phone will work on your plan? Especially when the customer service representatives for a company like Verizon are not working 24 hours a day. They're just working some of the time, and it seems to be very difficult to get in touch with them. So they say, well, text us. So you have to chat, but your phone has to work to chat with them. So it's an absolute mess. And so for those who are dependent on cell phones, that's another emerging problem. And for those of you who have these digital phones, these wireless, cordless, walk around the house or business phones that are connected to landlines, you just wait till that battery starts to quit. Then your phones are going to act really, really stupid. And one battery can take down all of the phones connected to that landline. One battery in one phone can mess up the other 4, 5, or 6. Seriously. And where are you going to get the replacement lithium batteries? Well, if you don't have them, you ought to get them now. Captain John, I think you might have created a shortage on blue towels. I went to look them up. Sam's Club is out of them, and Walmart is now charging an enormous amount. They used to be about $1.50. They've doubled in price per roll.
Well, you're right. Anybody, just like the coronavirus, if your first digit in your age is 6 or better, what you're used to as being normal will probably never come close to happening again. We are still not at the point where the pension funds, the 401ks, IRAs have collapsed. That is coming soon, probably this year. There are 6 entities on the planet that's propping up our failed economy. Here in the United States, that's the Federal Reserve. In Europe, you have the European Bank, the Bank of England, and Switzerland. You have 2 Asian banks, the Bank of China and the Bank of Japan. And, I guess the big question is, how long can they keep it up? And I was so shocked, that first relief bill that Congress passed, $2 trillion. I never expected anything of that magnitude. And the first link that I've got in the Depression section is Debt is Exploding. That links to the debt to the penny, which I've talked about numerous times. For fiscal year, and these end September 30th for the federal government, for the 2018 and 2019 years, the increase in debt was $1.2 trillion. At September 30, 2019, we had just over $22.7 trillion in debt. The day before yesterday, the 29th, that was up, and if you round it, $24.9 trillion. So be interesting to see. They'll report the 30th later this afternoon. We only need less than $50 billion added to that to be officially over 24.9. But we're talking about 22.7 to 24.9. That is $2.2 trillion, and we have 5 months left to go in the fiscal year. And what's more amazing, if you go back to November 7th, that was the day that we hit $23 trillion in debt. 5 months later, April 7th, is where we hit $24 trillion. But the month of April has been astonishing. We started the month $23.7 trillion. We're ending the month at 24.9. $1.2 trillion. What used to take a year to accumulate, we've done in a month. And there's several days in April where the daily debts increased $100 billion. And those 1.2 trillion years, $100 billion would be what you would do every month to get there. So we're seeing amounts of debt that used to take a year happening in a month, that used to take a month happening in a day. And, you know, the only reason they can do this is they're monetizing the debt, and they've got the interest rate for the federal government set to zero, essentially, a very low rate. And, you know, they'll jack that up as much as they can, but there's too much debt everywhere else. Plus, there is no economy. You can't print your way out of, you know, more gold or silver or food or, you know, all these other things. But even in the financial world, the velocity of money is down. Essentially, for my lifetime, it's been at 1.7 or better. It reached a peak in 1997 at 2.2. And then when that wonderful recession hit, you know, 2008, 2009, it went back down to the 1.7 level. And the last report I got is the last quarter of 2019, 1.42. And when we see the print for the first quarter of 2020, I bet it's going to be below that. And we can also use the Great Depression. You know, a lower velocity it's not a good thing. It was down to looks like about the 1.3, reaching almost the 1.25 level during the Depression, and it went down to 1.2 in 1946, just after the war. Of course, you got the news yesterday, week 6 of unemployment. We now have 30 million officially, and there's a lot of people think that the real number may be closer to 50 million. Quarter one GDP plunges 4.8% below zero. That's astonishing. There was still a worse point during the 2008, but we just started this one. And I gave a link there just in case you think I'm being a little pessimistic with the news. The Congressional Budget Office has released a report that says the coronavirus will wipe out 40% of the economy and unemployment will peak at 27 million. Well, we've already passed that. It's like I say, it's just astonishing to watch. You know, when I published the Financial State of the Union back in 2013, people would ask, when is this going to happen? I'd answer, well, I hope we have at least 2 or 3 years because I'm not ready. And, the answer I gave is you just have to look for the signs. And we saw the signs start, 2 or 3 years ago when they announced that they were going to implement quantitative tightening and start raising interest rates. And when they started doing that, that's about the time that the repo market blew up last fall. And now, in addition to this astonishing amount of debt that the federal government is piling up, the balance sheet for the Federal Reserve is now up to $6.66 trillion. Isn't that a nice number? And that's just what's officially on the balance sheet. We don't even know what's not on the balance sheet.
Captain John, would you say that these $1,200 alleged payments that people are going to get in the United States are anti-rioting, anti-looting payments to postpone the rioting and looting. Would you agree with? That's how I feel.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It's just buy time.
Okay, and then the next question is Weimar Republic, W-E-I-M-A-R, Republic, Germany, 1918. Captain John Ragan is with us, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. John, Weimar Republic, W-E-I-M-A-R, Republic, 1918 to 1933. It took a wheelbarrow full of currency because of this hyperinflation that persisted to buy a loaf of bread. And if you had a wheelbarrow, you could buy a city block with just the wheelbarrow. Do you think that's where we're tending to head? Did I lose Captain John Ragan?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
It's hard to say. History doesn't exactly repeat, but it does rhyme. And one of the things that may be even more concerning is back then they paid people twice a day because the money was losing value so fast that they'd take their morning payment to buy things before they lost more value.
They also, people would pay for their meal. If they could afford to go to a restaurant, they would pay for the meal before they ate it because it would cost more when they were done. Literally.
Now, imagine today, since they've instituted the income tax and the withholdings being automated, where you don't have a choice. It's taken out of your paycheck whether you want it or not. It takes time for companies, especially larger ones, to process their payroll every 2 weeks. That they need all that time just to get the work done. And can you imagine how do you pay people twice a day when you got all this red tape that the government's implemented since then?
Captain John Ragan, what do we do? We're looking at. I have a feeling you agree with me that meat prices to the farmer on the hoof, live animals, is plummeting because we have no place to sell our animals to, because the processing plants for chicken, pork, and beef are closing, and at least 25% have closed already because of thousands of workers being infected with the coronavirus. That being said, markets, I believe, are going to go local, but the result to the customer at the supermarket, if they were brave enough, risky enough to make the trip to the supermarket, they would probably find that inexpensive cuts are going to go way up in price, and expensive cuts like filet mignon are going to come down in price because restaurants can't absorb that meat in the market because restaurants are closed for the most part across the country. I see beef prices are going to go up, chicken prices are going to go up, and pork prices are going to go up in the short run. Then they'll level out and return to something reasonable. But that's going to take quite some time. What do you think we should do to prepare for this? To buy food now or wait? What do you think?
I think we're at the point where it's too late. If you can find food, obviously you want to stock up what you can. But it's what we've been saying for years. You need to have a garden. You need to be, raising animals, at least chickens or ducks. And, it takes time to build those skill sets. Well, we don't have the time anymore. It's not going to be nice. And Christians especially are still in denial. They think things are just going to go back to normal. And, if you read, in fact, I recommend, go back and read Acts, how the church was. They turned their back on the world. They didn't ignore it. They sent out missionaries. But, there were a lot less distractors back then, and they still had to recuse themselves from the world. And, they would raise their own food. And if we did things like that today, which we stopped doing 150 years ago, we wouldn't have to worry about mortgages and your food. It would all be there. But Christians got deceived into becoming worldly, and we're going to suffer for it. And it's just like the Great Depression. there is no easy way out. There's going to be a lot of pain and suffering. And, given the way people are today, especially with the drugs and the malnutrition, it's probably going to be a lot more violent than what they experienced during the Great Depression.
I have to agree with that. And some people think I'm advocating violence. I am absolutely not advocating violence. But I am saying that if you have to defend yourself, you ought to be ready to defend yourself, because there are people who have not prepared, who are just going to, they just might show up at your location, say, you know what, I'm really hungry and I'm really desperate. And what do you have? And so I have a feeling if you have animals, they are going to be at risk for being stolen. Cattle thieves, horse thieves, chicken thieves, hog thieves, the whole gamut.
Don't forget the carrot thieves.
Right, and lettuce and tomatoes, and so what are you going to do if you find somebody in your garden stealing your hard-grown produce? What would you do? And I'm not saying the answer is shoot them. I am saying you need to think about what you would do. Do you say, I'll tell you what, just take half? Or do you say, I'll tell you what, just leave me a couple and take all the rest? I mean, what are you going to do? Class, please think about that. Captain John Ragan, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your knowledge and expertise.